EJ, we have a tall order ahead of us today. Not only are we starting with the last division of this division preview series, but this is one of the hardest tasks that we've had in the entire series, this 40-episode long Leviathan that we call the offseason preview series. This might be the hardest one. You know why?
Mostly I do.
Because our task today, should you choose to accept it, is to inspire hope in Seattle Seahawks fans. We're going to try. No guarantee of victory, but as God is my witness, we will try. There's not a whole lot that we can say to cover the sting of losing Russell Wilson and the greatest player in franchise history, and knowing that no matter what the franchise did, he was probably gone. There were multiple years of back and forth and rumors, and supposedly it started when they first looked at Josh Allen when he was coming out, and it just kind of went downhill over a long period of time. And even if Seahawks fans didn't want it to be true, deep in the back of their head, I think they knew it was coming, which makes it hurt worse in some ways.
They did not.
The ones I talked to did. The ones I talked to,
the ones you talked
could tell for years like something was going bad, and if it was coming down to Pete versus Russ was going to get out of there.
True, and many rational Seahawks fans now, after the fact, say that they believed that, but all of the ones that I talked to last year, even the really smart ones, were like, "No, man, you're nuts. It's never going to happen." And I was like, "It might." And they're like, "No." And it was pure denial and fear because they know what's on the other side of having a good quarterback.
Which is where we're at now.
Yes. Especially if they've been Seahawks fans for a long time. They understand what happens if that is not the case. And then they had Russ. They had stability, and they had success, and they loved it, and they got real used to it. And then so when you suggested, "I'm going to take your blankie," they were like, "No." So anyways, it happened. Although we said it might happen. I'm not happy that it happened. I'm not going to say that I'm thrilled. I loved watching Russ play in Seattle, as did most Seahawks fans. And it was time, and it does bring us some opportunities to talk about what's next and some fresh stuff. And there is some good stuff there. So if we're going to focus on hope, because I kind of had the talk about the Seahawks thing down, but I was with you until you said inspire hope. And then I was like, oh. So there are some good nuggets in there. There are some fun changes, some things that will be better this year. Yes, Seahawks fans, some things will be better. Will all things be better? No. Will the record be better? Probably not. But there are some things that are better, and we'll focus on those.
I'll just say this. You and I are going to be at Russ's return, Monday Night Football, Week 1. We're going to be there. Same seats we were in last year when the Titans came to town. And I came up Week 2 for that game. We're going back to the same seats, right over where they raised the flag. I think Doug Baldwin did it when I was there at the Titans game. I would love to see who they're going to get to raise it in Russ's return. I have no. Can
thing.
I nominate Sierra? Is that who we can get up there?
They're really good. The 12th man flag is a tradition. If you're not familiar with it, if you haven't been to a Seahawks game, every game before the game, they raise the 12th man flag, and they get somebody to do it. And they have had a really fun, I would say, wide array of people. It's not all former Seahawks. Eddie Vedder's done it before. Just a really interesting tradition. And the week that you came up, your first Seahawks game, I think, in now Lumen Field, Doug Baldwin did it, and that was a classic. Doug Baldwin's a classic Seahawk, a class act as a person. Getting to see him raise the 12th flag was really fun. I've seen a good number as a former season ticket holder of folks raise that flag, and it's a super fun tradition. So the Russ return game raises a sort of really interesting question, like, are you going to try and turn the knife? Are you going to try and soften the blow? Which way are we going to go here?
For me, my choice, just to throw him off his game, if that's even possible for Russell Wilson. You get Golden Tate up there maybe future, have both of them raise the flag together, try to piss off Russ as much as humanly possible. Maybe you don't want to invite that. Maybe you don't want to invite the bad juju. But just saying, if you really want to twist the knife, those are options.
There's so many choices here, and now I'm going to be fascinated as much in that as the matchup, which is going to be really cool, and I'm glad we're going to be at the game. I'm actually going to see the Seahawks twice within the first 3 weeks because I'm going to the Bears-Seahawks preseason game in the middle of August.
Is that a week 2 or week 3?
It's the 19th, I think. So I don't know which week.
I think that's the one where people actually play in it, so that should be fun.
The funny thing is, Matt Eberflus, the Bears coach, said that starters are going to play for him because in the preseason, which is not typical if you don't watch the NFL preseason, as a lot of folks don't, but as hardcore junkies of the league and folks that love UDFAs battling for roster spots, we do. And Eberflus said he wants the starters to get time and gel together, so they're going to play. So I'm probably going to get to see a little Justin Fields that week, which would be really fun. Typically, the starting quarterback does not play, so yeah, it's I'm going to be at Lumen Field twice before we even get this whole thing rolling.
Well, why don't we look back at 2021, the last time I was there, give a little bit of a 2021 recap before we get into all of the, I would call it good stuff, mild stuff of the 2022 offseason. They did finish 7-10, last in the division, mired by injuries, including to Russ himself. Geno Smith had to come in and play, and there were a couple winnable games that they had with Geno that just kind of fell apart late. 2 back-to-back, if I recall correctly, actually. One of which, was it the Steelers? I think they were playing against the Steelers on primetime, and they were in it and definitely could have won it, but Geno just couldn't quite get him over the hump. So there were a couple more wins to be had, and if Russ played the entire year, you could argue that he would have gotten those wins and made a playoff push and done normal Russ things. Then Seattle would have been there in January, and it would have been Russ versus the world again in the playoffs. The overall roster was not in a place where they could have seriously contended with the Rams or the Bucs or any of those NFC powerhouses, but they at least might have been there in the playoffs. But Russ got hurt. Shit happened. The divorce became all but official, became apparent that things needed to split up, go separate ways. He got traded, all that kind of stuff. We'll get to that in a second. Home record 3-5, road record 4-5, 3-2 in their last 5 games. Obviously, when Russ came back, injured as he was, they did make a little bit of a push, but just too little, too late. Nothing they could really do about it. The thing that kind of stood out to me was even in the games that Russ was healthy, they were not the home field fortress that we're used to seeing from Seattle. That game we were at against the Titans, they were in control. They were winning that game handily, I would even argue, early on, but Derrick Henry just kept coming, and they hit a couple big balls deep down the field. Derrick breaks off a big run. Titans are right back in it, and you could just feel things unravel. And even Russ, in all of his might, couldn't contain that game and just win it by himself and pull off that Russ magic like we were so used to seeing. Even he could not overcome the rest of his roster in Seattle. And that game, I think, at least for me, was the first signal that things weren't right. Because that, in prime Seattle years, that was a very winnable game that they absolutely would have come away with. And they just couldn't close the door the entire time. And I think we just saw that over and over and over again. And by the end of the year, even when Russ was hurt and then coming back and trying to play injured and all that kind of stuff, by the end of the year, it became very apparent that whatever magic this franchise had, it just wasn't there anymore.
The cracks have been around for several years, but Russ has masked many of them and made those late season runs and the pushes and put them up, kept them in contention. So a lot of people were wondering when the wheels were really going to start to fall all the way off. We saw that early on last year, week 2, and then he got hurt, and it became really apparent that without Russ, there's not enough left. The defense is was not a defense that could contain people and control a game. The offense still had some firepower, but injuries and inconsistency, quarterback play, all that stuff, and it just looked bad. It was laid bare at that point, and everybody kind of got a chance to take a look. And the only hope for a quick fix was, we'll keep Russ, maybe we'll draft well, and then, that we'll just sort of bounce right back. When it became apparent that that was not going to be the case, everybody came to the realization that it was going to be a longer process. This was not going to be the rubbery rebound that Seahawks were used to, that this was going to be a bit of a rebuild.
I do wonder if the Jamal Adams trade never happened. What would this franchise look like right now? And this is nothing against Jamal Adams. Like, I do think he's a really good player. And I think he brought something to that defense that they desperately needed, which was a pass rusher. Weird as that is to say for a safety.
True.
But when he was healthy at times, he was their most effective pass rusher. If you look at pass rush win rate, it was actually kind of stunning. But they didn't have a first-round draft pick in 2022, and the roster was thin and needed to be restocked. They didn't have a first or a third the year before that. So they were facing a crisis where they knew they had to reload but didn't have the assets to reload. And the only way they could reload was by unloading Russ and getting the assets back, which is what they ended up doing. But there was no way to make Russ happy by investing the assets they needed to do to get the talent they needed to surround him with. They didn't have the money or the picks to do so. So it became really clear towards the end of the year that it was time to rip off the Band-Aid. And they did. And, Russ went down to Denver, and they got a more talented roster down there. They're going to be legitimate contenders, all that good stuff. It worked out for Russ. But I do wonder if that Adams trade didn't happen and they had those extra picks to, pick up offensive lineman or receiver, whatever the hell he wanted. If they just had those assets and didn't use them on Jamal Adams, a safety, would this team look different today? And by that, I mean, would Russ still be there? I would say, yeah, probably.
And I'm not sure that's the best thing. And I know that sounds heretical. That sounds like heresy. Russ is getting to the point where he wants to take a couple shots with a fully loaded contender, and he gets to do that in Denver. So agreed, it worked out for him. The parallels between this and the Kansas City choice this offseason of whether or not to keep Tyreek Hill are visible, right? Do we keep the one preeminent player? Now, it's way more important because it's a quarterback, not a wide receiver. So I'm not equating the importance of those positions, but in terms of a financial hit, in terms of draft capital for both franchises, the choice is, do we keep this one player and keep trying to patch it around him because we're going to have to spend either a ton of money to do that or a ton of draft picks? Like, Kansas City said, no, we're going to trade away Tyreek. We're going to take all those assets, and we're going to, in their case, reload because they already had their quarterback. With the Seattle situation, we're going to take all those picks, and we're going to rebuild because we don't have the answer at the most important position. But the choice is similar. One player or many players and rebuild the base. And both teams made a similar choice, but it puts them in very different positions because KC has a quarterback, and Seattle, I would argue, doesn't have the quarterback of the future on the roster right now.
Well, before we get to all of the assets they did get out of the Russ trade and how they used them, and to be honest, I think they did really well. We've talked very positively about their draft since the draft happened, and we'll kind of go over that in a bit. Before we get to how they use those assets, we need to talk about the people that did use the assets and kind of recap the power structure of the Seahawks, who's running things, not just at the very, very top, but also the coordinator level and the assistants underneath them. John Schneider and Pete Carroll, the dynamic duo, year 13. Some would say that maybe maybe they missed a window to potentially bring in new blood. I would probably agree with that assessment, since it cost them Russell Wilson apparently, but what's done is done. They're still there. They're still trying to reload and rebuild this thing within a 2-year window and try to make another run with Pete. They made their decision. I'm not saying I agree with it, but they're there. Carl Smith, associate head coach or assistant head coach, Carl Smith, second year on the job. They also have an assistant head coach / defense, which is Sean Desai, who is one of the best defensive coaches in the league, regardless of position coach or past defensive coordinator, whatever role you want to assign him. In terms of somebody who knows how to design an effective pass defense, and I think in terms of teaching his guys how to communicate, how to respond to certain looks with checks and constantly be in the right position, he's very good at building bust-proof secondaries, if that makes sense. In the sense that if guys get beat, they're just getting beat. They're not missing assignments. That's what I've always liked about, Sean Desai anywhere he's been. The communication and everybody's just doing their job. Again, you're going to lose some one-on-ones, but there's none of these, Dan Sorensen, Tyrann Mathieu throwing his hand in the air because somebody's running completely uncovered deep down the field. That doesn't really happen with Sean Desai defenses. So I think that he's an amazing addition for them from that standpoint, in the fact that we know the defense is going to communicate well. He's very good at getting his defenses to communicate. Offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. Year 2 there, comes from formerly the Rams. I'm curious to see how different the offense looks with Russell Wilson not there, because by the end of last year, we've talked about this multiple times, they just started running the Russell Wilson offense. They did not work the middle of the field. Most of the passing game was, we're going to stick in the gun, 3-step, all that kind of stuff. They didn't really do any sort of normal, under center, 5-step drop back pass game. Like, they didn't do any of that because Russell doesn't do that. So I'm curious to see how things change this year with a different quarterback that, runs different stuff or prefers different stuff. Will Shane Waldron, completely remake his offense again and maybe be more what he wants to run and not what Russell Wilson wanted to run? Clint Hurt, year 6 with the organization, but first year as DC, an amazing defensive line coach, also really good as an outside linebackers coach, which he did in Chicago, was there with Leonard Floyd in his rookie year, and one of Floyd's most productive years, period, was his rookie year under Clint Hurt. So I think that he's going to be awesome for Boye Mafe, and probably Uchenna Nwosu as well, who's for now the starter ahead of Mafe at Sam, but both those guys are really talented. I think Clint Hurt's going to do wonderful things with them. And then Larry Izzo, year 5 with the organization. He's the special teams coordinator. I know him as the former Texans special teams coordinator. I've heard nothing but good things about him in the locker room. Apparently people love him, love going to work with him every single day. Also, former special teams legend himself, Larry Izzo. One of the only guys, actually, no, I think the only guy ever to pee on the sidelines without Bill Belichick knowing about it. So that's his claim to fame.
These are the kind of, and I hesitate to say nuggets that you get on the Bootleg Football podcast. But overall, all jokes aside, this is a formidable staff, and I love the defensive changes in particular. I'm excited. I'll talk about the offensive side first. Shane Waldron. I'm excited for Shane Waldron, and I bet he is too. It's amazing to get to work with a Hall of Fame quarterback in Russell Wilson, but he didn't really get to call things. And again, we've talked about this multiple times. He kind of started to try and run his offense, and then Russ went, hey, what are you doing? And I think Shane probably looked at Pete Carroll and went, is this how this is going to go? And Pete went, yep, this is how this is going to go. Do what he says. He's the man. So he doesn't have that anymore. He doesn't have that presence of Russell Wilson, which is a towering presence if you're talking about Seahawks tradition. So I'm really interested to see if we're going to see Noah Fant running down the seam like Tyler Higbee. Are we going to see some of those weapons used in different ways? Some of the assets they've acquired, creating different offensive looks and sets than Seahawks fans have seen for the entire Russ era. That would be exciting. Would it work as well? We'll see, but it would be exciting. And on the defensive side, I have been banging the drum that the Seahawks needed a change on the defensive side away from Ken Norton Jr. for a couple of years because he hasn't been able to keep up. He hasn't been able to counterpunch. And I know boxing runs in the Norton family. He's not been able to set up a defense that could roll with the punches and flex as offenses adapt as they do relentlessly in the NFL. He's just been overmatched, and it's put the Seahawks at a real disadvantage. Now, with Desai, one of the bright young minds in the NFL defensive circle altogether, who is a brilliant guy himself and an excellent communicator, Clint Hurt, who has a serious tough guy mentality and is a very good technique and scheme coach. The two of them are familiar with each other. Them working together with a lot of the young defensive stars that are in Seattle or stars to be should be one of the most tremendously exciting things for Seahawks this year. Seahawks fans watching the team are going to get to see different things on both sides of the ball, but I think you're going to see more and faster progress on the defensive side than you are on the offensive side, and there's good reason for that, and a lot of it comes from Clint Hurt and Sean Desai.
Now, we've talked multiple times throughout this entire 2-month-long series about some teams being almost like a familial operation. Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. The Seahawks, I think, are one of those organizations because the amount of either former Seahawks themselves or connections to former Seahawks or connections to people that are currently Seahawks, the amount of history and connection that the assistant coaching staff underneath the coordinators have is not common around the league. There's very much a Seahawk DNA that runs through all of these assistants. Just one thing really quick. We want to thank our sponsor today for helping to make this show possible, and by extension, this entire series possible, Babbel. Babbel is a language learning app that, for people like me who really want to become functional speakers of any number of up to 14 different languages, including German, Spanish, French, and even Italian too, this is a really critical app for us. For Bootleg in particular, and of course my other YouTube channel, 30% of our audience is not in the United States, and just within our top 5 audiences alone, the main spoken languages are Spanish, German, and Portuguese, in addition to, obviously, English. So being able to learn new languages to better connect with our audience while we're traveling around the world and trying to go to different NFL games in different countries, that's a pretty big deal for us. Babbel lessons have been created by over 100 different linguistics experts, and they're scientifically proven to be effective, and in my opinion, most importantly of all, they also have speech recognition technology to help improve your pronunciation and accent, which, believe me, I know how tricky that can be to master, especially for German. Babbel also gives you access to podcasts, games, videos, stories, and even live classes, plus it all comes with a 20-day money-back guarantee. So if you yourself are interested in learning a second or maybe even third language, right now if you get a 3-month subscription to Babbel at the link in the description below, you'll also get an additional 3 months for free. That is 6 months of Babbel language lessons for the price of 3. You're going to find all of that at Babbel.com, promo code BOOTLEG. Again, that is Babbel.com, promo code BOOTLEG to take advantage of that offer. And with that, thank you once again to Babbel. Let's get back to the show.
On offense, I'm going to start off with Kerry Joseph because Kerry Joseph is one of the most fascinating players and coaches on this list. So he is the assistant QB coach for Seattle. He is a former Seahawks safety. He was a college quarterback, came to the league. The league said, nope, you're not going to be playing quarterback here. You're going to play safety. He did that successfully as a Seahawk. And after his time as a Seahawk, he goes to the CFL, the Canadian Football League. He joins the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He becomes a quarterback again, goes back to playing quarterback, and not like just back to, sort of catching the ball in every snap. He is named the most outstanding player, which is that league's MVP, and he becomes a Grey Cup champ. He basically wins their Super Bowl as a quarterback. So college quarterback, Seahawks safety, goes to the CFL, basically named MVP, and wins the Super Bowl. Fascinating player arc.
He's like Canadian Kurt Warner.
Yes, in reverse.
Basically
It's amazing. No, Kerry Joseph, great story. Another fun coach, Chad Morton, who is the run game coordinator and running back coach. He's a 7-year NFL veteran as a running back and a kick punt returner. He was drafted by the Saints in 2000 as a 5th rounder. Favorite stat about Chad Morton that I learned: only player in NFL history to return a kickoff for a touchdown in regulation and overtime of the same game. So,
Wait, what?
yes. He had 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns, one during regulation, one during overtime, and whenever a stat says only player in NFL history, my ears perk up. I'm like,
That's
there's
like a Devin Hester stat.
Yeah.
Like that's huh.
You would,
Okay.
if you had to guess, you would say Cordell Patterson, Devin Hester, maybe Metcalf, somebody
Josh
like that.
Cribbs.
Yeah, Eric, not DK. Sorry, my bad. I'm dating myself, but Josh Cribbs. Like, no, it's Chad Morton, only player in NFL history to hold that distinction, which is pretty cool. Then we get to Nate Carroll. If the last name sounds familiar, yep, it's Pete Carroll's youngest son. He's got 11 years of coaching experience. He was the wide receivers coach in Seattle for the last 4 years. He's moved on to being an offensive assistant now, more broad title, probably doing some game planning things that are outside just a specific position. And then there's Brad Idzik, who is the assistant wide receivers coach, and he is the son of John Idzik, who is the VP of football administration, again, for Seattle. Here's that family Seattle theme. 07 to 12, and then went on to be the GM of the Jets in 2013. So lots of connections to the Seahawks, different connections, family, player, former player, all that good stuff. On the defense and special teams side, going to start off with a name really familiar to Seahawks fans if they've been following the team for a while, and that's Aaron Curry, who is the assistant defensive line and specifically DE coach. This is the former first rounder for the Seahawks. 4th overall, was thought to be a can't-miss prospect. Won the Butkus Award in 2008 as the nation's top college linebacker. If you talk to everybody, including me that year, who was just getting into draft evaluation, sort of part-time, and said, do you think Aaron Curry will be a success? Probably 10 out of 10 would have said, yeah, bust potential on him is extremely low. Only played 4 years in the league, ended up having a cup of coffee with the Raiders at the end of his career, never really did anything in the league, but yet those strong family connections, once a Seahawk, always a Seahawk. Seahawks brought him back a few years ago as a coach, one of his first coaching jobs, and he's currently their assistant DL and DE coach. Really interesting sort of turnaround. You can call it a second act, whatever you want to, but Aaron Curry, largely lauded as one of the biggest draft busts of all time, biggest draft surprise busts of all time, is back with the Hawks and helping them win ball games on defense. Really cool story. Damian Lewis is their assistant defensive line coach for defensive tackles. His name should sound familiar. Former NFL DT, played 10 years in the league with the Rams, Panthers, and Texans. And finally, Deshaun Shedd, one that you were happy to see on this roster of coaches, is their assistant DB coach. 8-year NFL career as a DB for the Seahawks, the Lions, and the Saints. Was part of Seattle's Super Bowl winning team in 2013 and now back as a coach. So really strong thread of former Seahawksdom throughout the entire notable coaches list.
So in 2009, Aaron Curry's draft year, he was obviously the first linebacker taken. The second linebacker taken was Aaron Maben, who also had like less than 40 career tackles. The third, fourth, fifth, and sixth linebackers taken in that class were Brian Cushing, Clay Matthews, James Laurinaitis, Ray Maualuga. You never know.
You never know is the best thing to pull out of that entire story, but it's really cool that he gets to that the team would bring him back, give him another opportunity, and he gets to go make his, hopefully legend as a coach. Maybe he becomes one of the greatest defensive line coaches ever after 10 or 15 years, but the opportunity to come back even after what would be, you would imagine not a great taste in the Seahawks' mouth. The Seahawks are a family organization, and they will bring back their own.
Now, looking at the losses section on the roster, this could be people that got cut, people that got traded, all the general ways that you can quote unquote lose talent. The list is fairly extensive. Some of them were key contributors. Obviously, the Russell Wilson trade. I'm not going to belabor the point. We already talked extensively about him leaving and why that happened and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of everybody else that they just shed on the roster, mostly trimming the fat, I would say. Adrian Peterson, he's 37. I don't consider that a major loss at this point. Alex Collins played about a quarter of the snaps. Not a major loss. They lost 4 edge rushers. Again, lost in keywords or in quotation marks. Ben Samayoa, Kerry Hyder, Carlos Dunlap, Rasheem Green. Dunlap's probably the best out of those 4, but he's also a part-time player at this point. He's a guy that's going to come in for 30 snaps a game. Not going to start for you. He's going to be a rotational guy in Kansas City, for instance, where he just signed 4 days ago, I think, as of the time we're recording this, for like $8 million a year. So again, not a major loss, I would say. Gerald Everett, quality tight end, but you could argue they got a better one back in Noah Fant. So most of the guys that they shed were not major pieces, and therefore I think it's fine. They're not anybody that you can't replace semi-easily. There were 2, including Russell, that I feel like really hurt, and it was Russell himself and Chris Carson, who unfortunately had to retire just a couple days ago as of the time of us recording this due to a neck injury. Carson is one of my favorite Seahawks of the last decade or so because he reminded me so much of Beast Mode. How he ran, how aggressive he was, how tough he was, how the contact balance, everything like that. He could catch. He was a 3-down player. That one legitimately hurts that they're not ever going to get to use him again. And I think the Kenneth Walker pick, when it happened, signaled a little bit that something wasn't quite right there. And, they signed back Rashad Penny like a month before that. So the signing of Rashad Penny back and drafting Walker, immediately red flags went off. We're like, okay, why are they doing that unless something's not looking good with Carson? And then he really did. He tried to come back, but it wasn't going to happen. And so he had to retire. That one legitimately hurts me because when he's on the field, he is a difference maker. But we only got, unfortunately, 5 years of Chris Carson in the NFL. I wish we got a lot more than that because he's a brilliant, brilliant player.
All right. Carson's an all-time great Seahawk, and I will miss watching him run the football because he was a lot more than a lot of people thought he was. Again, starting where he started, he was not a heralded player coming out of college. He fit the Seahawks mold, and he played really, really hard. And unfortunately, he got injured in a way for that position that you can't continue with. You can't continue with that neck injury and keep lowering your head and running the way he ran. With that condition. It's a bummer because he was an amazing player. I put out a tweet when he said he had to retire that he always seemed like a player that got the most out of what he had. And usually that's kind of a backhanded compliment to lower skilled players. In his case, it wasn't. He got everything out of what he had, and he had a lot. And that's what made him a great player and a fun player to watch. The other one on this list, I would argue, that hurts and certainly hurts Seahawks fans' hearts is Bobby Wagner.
Oh, shit, I forgot Bobby's gone.
Yep. Bobby's right up there with Russ. It's binary stars, offense and defense. Right. So Russ has been the face and the leader and everything else, but Bobby, just as importantly on the other side of the ball, also Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame resume, who looks to have early returns with the Rams that look really good. And much like Russ ends up with a very talented team in Denver, Bobby ends up with a very talented team, arguably just as talented, reigning Super Bowl champions, and gets to bring his style of play, his leadership, his knowledge, his abilities that still now, is he as fast as he used to be? No. Does he cover as much ground? No. Is he just as smart? Yes, he is still whip smart, and the Rams have already commented, some of the Rams coaches commented that it's annoying that he's always in the right place. Like, they're like, he shouldn't be able to get there, but the reason he gets there is because he knows pre-snap, and he still gets there. No wasted motion, super efficient. All the great hallmarks of Bobby Wagner play mentally are still there, and he's surrounded by way more talent, I think it's safe to say, in LA on the defensive side of the ball than he would have been in Seattle. Does it hurt to lose him? Yes. Franchise legend. Does he go to a better place? Yeah, for this year he does. That's not going to ease the sting, especially that he stayed in division. For Seahawks fans, that's going to hurt a little bit. They're going to be happy because Seahawks fans love Bobby Wagner. They're going to be a little bit sad because it's for the Rams.
I cannot believe I forgot that Bobby is gone. In my head, I just always Seahawk forever. Like
you're just like Seahawks fans. Russ and Bobby never leaving.
It was almost more unconscionable that Bobby was gone than Russ. Like, to me, like, Legion of Boom. He was the heart and soul of it as a young linebacker.
Yeah.
Like, he was a top 2 linebacker in his prime. It was him and Kuechly. That was the discussion for half a decade?
Yep.
Who's the best linebacker in the league? Like, Bobby to me was... My brain almost doesn't even compute that he's not going to be in Seattle this year. I completely forgot he's in LA. And for only $10 million too, which for a linebacker who is still Wagner's caliber. I know he's older now, but like you said, he's so smart and no wasted steps. He never falls steps. He's always going to be in the right place at the right time, even if he's not getting there as fast as he used to. Like, now he's in that kind of like late stages Ray Lewis period where he's winning on smarts and experience and all that kind of stuff. And in some ways, those guys are more dangerous because everything they do is intentional. They're not guessing anymore. If they're getting somewhere, they're getting there because they know they need to. So
my favorite thing about that is watching the young Rams linebackers, specifically the guys that play inside, and their absolute like doe-eyed reverence for Bobby Wagner, because he is what they all aspire to be, and they just look at him like, whoa, he's here. Like, he's on my field wearing my uniform, and I'm just like, oh, like, it's really cool to see.
First ballot Hall of Famer. And I will fight anyone who disagrees. First ballot Hall of Famer.
I don't know why they would.
Yeah. Also, we should probably mention DJ Reed. He's with the Jets, too. Again, solid, capable starting corner. They brought in some options to replace him as their starting right corner. He mostly played on the right side last year. There have been early positive reports out of camp. I definitely believe them for one. Not sure I believe them for the other, which is probably the best possible transition that I'm going to get to all of their retentions and third-party additions. I'll kind of throw them all in one group because I think they all kind of fit together. Will Dissly, they brought back for $8 million a year to presumably be their starting tight end. Kyle Fuller, the center, not the corner, brought him back. Geno Smith, they brought him back to compete with Drew Lock. Sidney Jones to be their starting left corner. Al Woods, 35 years young, still doing it on the interior. Rashad Penny, mentioned they brought him back after that ridiculous tear that he went on late in the year where he put up 1 billion yards. So they brought him back even after they didn't pick up his option, but they're like, kind of still want him on the roster, especially with the Carson questions lingering. And then Quandre Diggs, that's the big one, brought him back at safety, $13 million a year, which considering the going rate for, say, Minkah Fitzpatrick is $18 million. I love Minkah. This is not a shot at Minkah, but I would rather have Quandre Diggs at 13, personally, for the value for what you're getting. Dollars per snap, dollars per production. Quandre Diggs at $13 million is a great deal. Now, in terms of the replacing DJ Reed part of the equation that I mentioned, third-party additions, Artie Burns... Bears fans, cover your ears, and Steelers fans, cover your ears. Artie Burns at $2 million a year at right corner right now in camp is getting hype. Not sure I believe it, but it's happening, and we have to talk about it. We have to report it. If Artie Burns turns into a capable starting corner for this defense, Sean Desai should go to the Hall of Fame right alongside Bobby Wagner. First ballot, I don't give a shit. If he makes Artie Burns a good, solid starting corner, I bow before thee, Sean Desai.
I will lose my goddamn mind because I did not like Artie Burns coming out in the draft. I had Steelers fans arguing me up and down. No, he's great. And after 3 years, Steelers fans were like, "Oh no, you were right. He's not good." And then, as retribution, the universe put him on the Bears. And I was like, "Oh, this." And people were like, "Hey, man, he was a first rounder." I was like, "No, no, he's not great." And he was average. He's better than he was in his first couple of years in the league. He has improved. He's not, in my mind, who you want starting at outside corner. Now, it's early camp. It's hype. Pete loves to say positive things about everybody. So that's all real possible. What the Seahawks are hoping for, Steelers don't want to hear anything more about it. What the Seahawks are hoping for is that one of their draft picks ascends, wins the job as a rookie, and Artie Burns can teach him all his nice tricks, and the rookie can start, and Burns can be the backup. Because Artie Burns, let's be honest, is a fine backup corner, especially at that price. Like, he can come in and give you some solid quarters. You don't want him leading off against some very talented receivers in your own division week in and week out.
No way. Like, again, for me, best case scenario, Kobe Bryant, the Seahawk, obviously, ends up winning that job because I think that Bryant's ceiling is enormous, and I really, really, really want to see what he can do. I've seen what Artie Burns can do. We're just hoping for okay. That's what we're hoping for. And I don't mean to be harsh, but we're year 5 on this thing? And year 5 and team number 3, I don't know. I just don't buy it.
I think they'll be all right. Like, Trey Brown's going to start the year on the pup. And when Trey Brown comes off and they've got Kobe Bryant, like, they'll have enough options at outside corner with Desai. I mean, look, Sean Desai, you were talking about bust-free coverages. You have to remember that last year in Chicago, Sean Desai patched together a secondary with Jalen Johnson and nothing. Because
Kendall Vilder starting outside.
Kendall Vilder was starting outside. If you don't know who that is, I completely forgive you. Eddie Jackson was not playing up to spec. They had Gibson at the other safety. He was average at best, and they were rotating Duke Shelley, Kendall Vilder at the other corner in a division with the Minnesota Vikings receiving core, Aaron Rodgers. And the Bears hung in games with that patchwork bunch of dudes.
And even Artie himself
Artie
playing
Burns
some too.
Was rotating through that. And Sean Desai made it work. So if you bring back Trey Brown off the pup and Kobe develops a little bit, it's not as if he's a terrible player. He was a good player at Cincinnati. Like, you're going to have enough pieces for Desai to weave together a more than functional secondary.
Now, in addition to bringing in Artie Burns at $2 million, which I have to imagine was a Desai-approved move because he coached him in Chicago too. He wouldn't have brought him over from Chicago unless he liked working with him. Now, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, Noah Fant was the trio they got back in the Russell Wilson trade. Drew Lock, he's still 26 and he's got talent. We'll see. But I kind of used the same methodology that I used for Desai and Burns. If Shane Waldron gets the most out of Drew Lock at this point, I bow before you, sir. You are truly a special coach. And that's nothing against Drew Lock, but we just never saw it in Denver. We never saw it. Like, maybe it was just a function of environment. Maybe it was just a function of who was coaching him. But I found myself, especially after his rookie year, I found myself so utterly disappointed with where he was versus where he could have been. Because I remember him early on in college when he was playing as a freshman. And I was like, holy shit. Like, this kid's got a gun. He can move. I thought he was, future top 10 talent. And there was a lot of people back then who thought he was a future top 10 talent. And he just never got there. And then we got to the NFL and same things. Oh, he's got arm strength, mobility, all the tools. Seems like a cool, likable kid. Just never got there. So hopefully Shane Waldron can work his magic. Again, he's still only 26. Maybe there's still something there, but I mean, going back to when he was 19, I feel like I fell for it over and over and over again. I'm not ready to fall for it again. Now, Noah Fant, still really like him. He's probably going to be competing with Disley for the starting tight end job, and at least if it was up to me, I would favor Fant in that battle, just on pure talent, even though Disley has the history with the franchise, and we know what he can do. He's a reliable target, all that kind of stuff. In terms of just pure ceiling, I would favor Fant. And then Shelby Harris, all underrated team, I would say, in terms of interior defensive linemen. We love Shelby Harris. He can rush the passer, known for batting down passes, by the way, because he's got tons of length. Really good at kind of timing his jumps and knocking down stuff at the line of scrimmage. Very solid interior player. I mentioned Uchenna Nwosu before. He is likely going to be the starting Sam for now in front of Boye Mafe. For me, Boye Mafe is really talented. It's going to be tough to keep him off the field. Wouldn't be surprised if he pushes for the starting job sooner rather than later. But for now, Uchenna Nwosu is that guy at Sam. Austin Blythe, probably going to compete for starting center because Pocic is gone. Yep. So it's either him or Kyle Fuller, and I'd probably favor Blythe in that battle over Fuller. Justin Coleman, 29 years old, going to be competing for starting reps at corner, alongside obviously Brown and Burns and Bryan and Tariq Woolen, all these guys. They got a million corners on this roster at this point. You know, maybe he'll compete with Ugo Amadi for the nickel job, yep. But we'll see what happens there. That's probably a camp battle to watch, which by the time this goes live, maybe we'll have an answer to that, but as of right now, we don't. And then Quentin Jefferson, back in the Seattle area. I thought he was a very underrated inside/outside guy that you could put at a variety of different spots. Again, probably like 30 snaps a game-ish type of rotational player, but it's 30 snaps of fire and fury. He was really, really productive, at least in terms of for his snap count, his first time around in Seattle. And he's only 29. I think he's still got a lot of gas left. I really love that pickup for them. Again, Pete Carroll already knows what he can do, and he's a very quality player.
Yeah, I like a lot of the additions. Uchenna Nwosu is one of my favorite. I think he showed some of what he could do with the Chargers, but he was never really going to be a key starter for them, and I think he is for the Hawks. I would love to see him and Boye Mafe in certain packages on the field together. If you're sort of talking about the way we talk about offensive line, your best five, I think Uchenna Nwosu and Boye Mafe on third downs will be a lot of fun. And I'm hoping we get to see that and they don't just stack them and say, well, they're both play the same position, so we can't do that. If Mafe can handle a couple of rush packages and being opposite Nwosu, now you've got my attention. That should be a good time. Shelby Harris becomes more important given that they sort of cleaned house on the defensive line and they needed new starters, not just a throwaway or a throw in. That was a purposeful choice by the Hawks to say we need to get a player back who we can use. Fant, I think, wins the starting tight end job because, boy, if I'm Shane Waldron, I want his ability to stretch the field. Will Disley is a great tight end, and I really enjoy watching him play. Noah Fant's got skills. Will Disley doesn't. Blythe will most likely be the starting center. Justin Coleman right now is penciled in as the starting nickel. And Q-Jeff is a great, second wave rotational defensive player who, again, the staff is really familiar with, and I hope it's just like old home week and he comes back, plugs right in, and I realize it's a different system, but he can be productive again because he was the all underrated team when he left Seattle the first time, and now he's back.
Now, in terms of the draft, we've talked multiple times about it since the draft happened, but for those of you who are new here, spoiler alert, we loved it. This was a very not Seahawks type draft. And I don't mean that because it was good. Like, the Seahawks have had good drafts before. But it was a non-Seahawks type draft because it almost felt chalky. Charles Cross, like we were hoping would be the pick, but we weren't convinced was going to be the pick at the top. Boye Mafe, we loved, but it was almost weird that the Seahawks took a player that was universally highly graded. I was pleasantly surprised that they got away from the kind of random Seahawky picks and just took a whole bunch of really damn good players that, at least speaking from experience, everybody had actually watched before.
Yeah, this is John Schneider getting back on the bike. He got a bunch of picks, and everybody was really quietly worried about that in Seattle. They're like, yeah, he got a bunch of picks for Russell, but have you seen what he does with the picks lately? And instead, he rips off this. And this is a masterpiece of a draft. Yes, it takes 3 years to grade a draft, but on its face value, for where they started and what they got, this is masterwork. This is incredible stuff. Round 1, pick 9, Charles Cross, the tackle, my OT1 from this class, Mississippi State. Seahawks need help at tackle. Charles Cross is a perfect fit, and in terms of where he's available and their choice, can't say anything bad about it. Round 2, pick 40. Both of these were picks from the Broncos. Boye Mafe, the linebacker from Minnesota. Crazy athletic. Like almost unlimited physical upside potential. When he gets with, I guarantee Clint Hurt was like, cool when they selected him because he knew he had a new weapon. Round 2, pick 41. This is where Seahawks fans took some umbrage. I don't know if I say take some umbrage, because with Chris Carson retiring, getting the best running back in the draft, in my opinion, my RB1, Kenneth Walker III from Michigan State. Love the value pick. People say he didn't catch the ball a lot at Michigan State. That's because they didn't throw him the ball a lot at Michigan State. If you look at the few reps where he caught the ball, he ran routes like a wide receiver. He catches the ball with his hands, and he was able to be very productive in yak afterwards. Great pick, and with Chris Carson retiring, makes even more sense. So within the first 3 picks, you've got OT1, a very highly rated edge, and RB1. That alone, as a draft class, would be real good right there, especially with John Schneider's recent history for drafting. I would have been satisfied right there. Didn't stop. Hits kept on coming. Round 3, pick 72. They go across the state to Wazoo, Washington State, for those of you not in Washington. Get Abraham Lucas, very skilled offensive tackle, who slid a little bit right as we got to the draft, but he was on preseason All-America lists. He was thought to be in the running for the top 2 or 3 tackles in this draft class. Very talented player, and when you pair him and Cross together, it's really possible the Seahawks got a pair of bookends that could last for 6 or 7 years. That's impressive. Keeps right on driving. Round 4, pick 109, Kobe Bryant, the corner from Cincinnati, who we've talked about was the corner across from Sauce Gardner at Cincinnati. Not nearly as skilled as Sauce, but nobody in this draft was. That's why Sauce went in the first round of the Jets. That's nothing against Kobe Bryant. He is a very skilled player and could, in this secondary, especially with Sean Desai's coaching, rise to a very capable starter pretty quickly. Round 5, pick 153, one of our 10 gems on defense, Tariq Woolen, the cornerback out of UTSA. We talked about Boye Mafe being freaky athletically. Tariq Woolen, about 6'4", runs in the high 4.2s, long as all get out. Yeah, he needs to work on technique. He's only a year and a half into playing corner. Again, almost unlimited physical potential. If he develops into a starting corner, the NFC West is not going to like throwing at him. He is aggressive, loves to tackle. A lot of guys that tall, not their favorite thing to do. Tariq Woolen, aggressive, physical, fast, long, everything you need in a corner. Just got to put together some more technique reps. We'll see how that goes. Round 5, pick 158. It's underrated. I think this might have been my favorite, like, nobody knows who that is pick. And I think he could turn out to be really productive. And that's Tyreek Smith, the defensive end or edge from Ohio State. In a typical year, not a loaded draft class like this one that was one of the largest draft classes in history, Tyreek Smith, in my mind, goes in the 3rd round at the latest. He's an
3rd, 4th, somewhere around there. Yeah.
All-around edge player, played at a big school, big conference, was productive, has the physical traits you're looking for. The only reason he's available in round 5 this year is just because there were so many edges. I think the Seahawks got a bit of a steal in Tyreek Smith. Round 7, pick 229, one of your favorites, Bo Melton, wide receiver from Rutgers. Again, in a typical year, Bo Melton is not in the 7th round. He shouldn't have been in the 7th round in this draft, but he was, and the Seahawks benefit. Round 7, pick 233, Derek Young, wide receiver from Lenore-Rhyne, who we got to see at the Senior Bowl. This guy is more of a project. He is an incredible athlete. Are you sensing a theme here? Just rocked up as a wide receiver. Big, tall, strong, solid guy who's also crazy fast. Turns out not as great at catching the ball, but has potential for special teams and as a developmental player that you could stash on the practice squad that nobody's going to steal. And if he polishes up his receiver game, and Seattle has done very well with lower drafted or undrafted wide receiver prospects in the past, if you hit on Derek Young, you're going to hit big because his physical skills are as good as anybody in the draft. His receiving skills need some work. So we'll see if they can bring those up to par. And if they do, you could get a contributor for what is basically a throwaway lottery pick at the end of the draft.
I think between Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas at the top 2 tackle spots, Kenneth Walker at running back, Kobe Bryant at corner, Boye Mafe at, let's just use the ubiquitous edge term because who knows exactly where he's going to line up. I think as rookies, you've got 5 potential starters here. And that's not even taking into account, hey, maybe Tyreek Smith turns into something. Maybe Bo Melton, even though it is a little bit of a harder wide receiver room to crack because DK Metcalf is obviously one of the highest paid, most revered receivers in the league at this point. Tyler Lockett's a Seahawks legend in his own right. Freddie Swain, D. Eskridge, Marquise Goodwin. Like, there's still a whole bunch of guys there, and obviously Derek Young too. It's a little bit of a tough receiver lineup to crack for the starting spot, but Bo Melton or Derek Young both have the talent to do it eventually. I think we're looking at 5 early starters here, potentially up to 7 starters total if they really knock this draft out of the park. And that would be up there with the 2012, I would say, Seahawks class of greatest in franchise history. Even if they're just, I use the term just, getting 5 starters out of this class, that would still be one of the greatest classes of all time. And so I think John Schneider really, really needed a draft like this because, boy, my patience was wearing thin. There was too many years of, let's just say it, wasted picks. And I think the wasted picks really is what depleted the depth on this roster and the top end depth on this roster to the point that made Russell want to leave because he felt like he couldn't make a run with where the roster was at. And he was right. So John Schneider needed this draft, and boy, he nailed it. So golf claps to him. Did a phenomenal job. Hopefully the coaching staff can turn these guys into a threshing machine because they have the talent to do it. UDFA-wise, I'm not going to lie, EJ, the only one I really want to talk about is the one that's no longer there, Caleb Ellaby. What the hell, man? I loved him coming out. I thought that if there was any quarterback room in the league that he could have stuck, it would have been this one, and somehow he's already gone. What the hell?
I don't know. I wish I did. This is Sky Moore's quarterback from Western Michigan. Both of us, Caleb Ellaby caught both of our eyes watching Sky Moore's tape, and there's something there. He is a talented quarterback. First indication that might not be a thing was he was only a camp invite. He wasn't a true UDFA. It was just a show up basically for, rookie camp weekend, and we'll see if we want to offer you something. Whatever, he didn't stick. I don't have a ton of faith in the Seahawks doing that because some of my previous all-time favorite quarterback prospects got a cup of coffee with the Seahawks and they didn't stick there either. So I wasn't holding my breath, but yeah, I would have loved to see Caleb Ellaby again, even as a developmental player on the practice squad, because it's not like the Seahawks are particularly loaded at quarterback right now. only a couple of other players. They did bring in quite a handful of players, which I always love to see. I will say John Schneider's UDFA tastes run slightly differently than mine, and he usually brings in a lot of players that I wouldn't have or I'm just plain old not familiar with. The Seahawks are definitely a beat the bushes type franchise and find hidden gems if they can. The two that probably top my list are Bubba Bolden, the safety from Miami, very athletically talented, played in some rough defenses at Miami, not necessarily his fault. I could see him being a very classic Seahawks undrafted free agent that sticks, ends up being a contributor both in sort of like dime packages, special teams, whatever. The Seahawks have a strong tradition of UDFA contributions. I could see Bubba Bolden slotting into that. And the other one is a complete long shot. This is not, I think he's going to make the roster. This is, oh my God, he had some of the funnest tape in this entire draft class. And it's Josh Onu I knew I was going to blow it. Onu Giogu. Can't get that out. Ono Giogu. There we go. From Framingham State. Now, if you haven't heard of Framingham State, yeah, not a huge school. So he was playing against a lot of plumbers and future tractor salesmen, and I get that. Despite that, this guy has a knack. He plays edge. He has a knack for picking up tackles and using them as a weapon to knock into the quarterback. And he does it over and over again. It's like not a fluke. He just basically forklifts tackles and drives them into their quarterback, which has got to be terrifying as a quarterback. But his highlight tape made a bit of a splash in draft circles. People started to give him some attention, even though I think Framingham State is D3, if that. And, you know.
Yeah, but he's 6'2", 250 with a 35-inch vert and a 10-foot broad. Like that, you got to get a shot with those kind of measurables.
Yeah,
you know?
Those kind of measurables and just ludicrous tape. Like if you're looking to scout players at the lower levels, what you want to see is utter domination. Like you just want to see them destroying all those, future lawyers, doctors, tractor salesmen, and postmen. You just want to see him leveling those people. And that's all his tape was just him blowing up guy after guy and making them look completely helpless. So Seahawks saw it, gave him a shot. He is in camp. He made it through the initial rookie weekend. So, something to keep an eye on because, again, like you said, he's not short on tools.
All right, team floor, team ceiling, final segment. This is our projected ceiling and wins for the team as well as our projected floor and wins. Somewhere within that spectrum, we think they'll land. For me, I think max 8 wins, and that's pretty much because of the quarterback situation. We saw what happened to this team last year when Russell was not there to bail them out. And even though the roster has added some talent we really like, it's still not all the way there to the point where it can carry the quarterback situation that they have right now, which is we're staring down the barrel of either Drew Lock or Geno Smith. Like maybe by the time this comes out, we'll know Jimmy G maybe going. I not that I think that changes a whole lot. It's still 8 wins for me without Jimmy G. If Jimmy goes there, give him 9, sure. But they can be an average team, which I think considering where the roster was at last year and where they're in the process of trying to build this thing back up to what it was in the early 2010s, if they can just be an average team, that's a success this year. It really is. The floor, however, if things bottom out, similar to how they did last year, but the floor with Russ is always going to be higher. Looking at their schedule, I really only see 4 games on the roster that I think I feel good about. And it's one of them against the Niners, because they're always going to beat the Niners at least once. They have a habit of beating the Niners, just no matter how good each team is. The Cardinals week 6, because Hopkins is not going to be back yet from suspension, I think is a winnable game for them, plus it's at home. The Giants is a winnable game because I do like the Seahawks' defensive talent and their defensive coaches, and I'm still not 100% sure what we're getting out of Daniel Jones here. So I think that going into the game is winnable. And the Panthers, because Panthers. So 4 is probably about my floor. I think that some people are saying, okay, they're going to be first overall contention. Maybe, I mean, 4 wins would be contention for that level of pick, but I don't necessarily think they're the worst team in the league or have the potential to be the worst team in the league. I do think that they have enough talent to at least just be below average, even if the bottom falls out. But I would be shocked if they're anything more than 8. I really would. I don't quite see it.
Yeah, my absolute ceiling is just a little bit more optimistic. I say 9, and that is if Waldron's offense was just hidden under Russ and it explodes and they start putting up some points with whoever is at quarterback. For the record, I don't think it'll be Jimmy G. I see how it makes sense. I don't think it happens. If it does happen, I don't think it changes that much. Maybe, like you said, you get one more win. That doesn't mean 10 for me. I'm going to 9 with that. My ceiling's 9, and that's the absolute ceiling, the best possible result for the Seahawks this year in my mind. 9 wins. My floor, also a game higher than yours at 5 because, yes, those 4 winnable games, but between Pete Carroll and Sean Desai and Clint Hurtt bringing up the level of the defense, they're going to surprise somebody. In the other 12 games outside those 4 or 5 winnable ones you saw, they're going to steal one. And even if they're terrible, they're going to steal one. And I don't see Pete Carroll-led team, even without Russell, winning only 4 games. I would say 5. Now,
the Chargers are fucking sweating right now. They play them on October 23rd, and that just feels like a Chargers loss to me.
We just got done talking about the Chargers chargering. I can't see the Seahawks winning less than 5. They have a lot of talent. Is it enough talent not to be at the highest levels of competition in the NFL right now? This is not a team that's going to contend for the division or even a wild card. Even at 9 wins, it would be rough within their own division. And that's their best possible case. They're probably going to be somewhere in the middle. This is maybe a 6-win team, maybe a 7-win team if they play pretty well this year. It is a rebuilding year, and they have to find their quarterback still. Once they do, if this draft class develops, if some of the younger players that were already on the roster continue to develop, this team could get good pretty quickly, but they are going to have to solve the quarterback question, just like any team in the NFL.
Well, hopefully, Seahawks fans, we gave you that little bit of hope you wanted and needed, because I know that it's been a rough offseason. Russ is gone, Bobby's gone. But hey, DK got paid. DK's not going anywhere.
DK got paid.
You got that. We're going to be up there in a few weeks at week 1. Go tailgate with you guys. We're doing our best here. We're trying to give you some hope. We're trying to make you feel happy about the Seahawks again. Here. It's going to be one of those years. It's going to be one of those years. But I think that they are set up to have the potential. Good Lord, that's a lot of qualifying statements. They are set up to have the potential to maybe possibly reload and turn this thing around and go on another run in a couple years. Still got to get a quarterback. That's priority number 1. But if there was ever a year to get it, it's probably in the next quarterback class coming out. So, hey, build the roster, get into a good spot for like Will Levis or whoever to come in 2023, and we'll go from there. We'll see how it is. But hopefully, again, Seahawks fans, you're feeling semi-decent or as decent as you possibly can. If you want to hear about the rest of the NFC West, or if you're just an NFL fan in general and you want to hear about the rest of the NFC West, we're doing deep dives the rest of the week on the rest of the division. This is our final division in this series.
The last week.
2 months into this beast, we're almost done. We got 4 more episodes remaining. Tomorrow is the Cardinals, right? Cardinals, and then Niners, then Rams, then the NFC West macro division look where we're kind of picking the winner and picking the individual awards. So come back on Friday for that as well. And then by the time this comes out and by the time this series is over, we're going to be like 2 weeks into preseason and we're starting up on the regular season. So lots more coming your way. Thank you all for listening. Be back here same time tomorrow, same place for our Cardinals episode. And until then, later.
Take care.